This is one of the stories I heard from my friend. He's an avid urban explorer. With his permission, I've shared this here with you. I'll keep his name anonymous though. Several years ago, he explored a certain abandoned mine. Normally he preferred to conduct urban explorations at night when visibility was low, making it less likely that he'd be captured by security cameras. However, the forest road leading to this mine was clearly visible from the town at the base of the mountain. Even through the trees, the car's headlights would be noticeable at night, he reasoned, and so he broke his usual rule and decided to explore the site during daylight. The abandoned mine still had its ore processing plant, employee dormitories, and management facilities intact. It was a fantastic location packed with points of interest. While parts of the barricade sealing off the mine shafts had been removed by other ruin enthusiasts, making it technically possible to enter the tunnels, he judged that exploring with just his sneakers and a single flashlight was a little too dangerous. He decided to limit his investigation to the surrounding facilities instead. It was immediately after entering one particular structure, presumably the ruins of a refining or ore crushing facility, that something happened. The building had no windows and it was pitch black inside. He switched on his flashlight and wandered through the building, examining the abandoned machinery and equipment scattered around. Suddenly he tripped over something and fell. His flashlight fell from his hand, striking the floor hard enough to eject its batteries. The floor had a slight incline, and one of the batteries began rolling away, deeper into the building, relying on the faint light seeping from the entrance. He pursued the battery. Strangely, the rolling battery abruptly came to a halt. Retrieving the battery and placing it back into his flashlight, he directed the beam towards where the battery had stopped, and he noticed a large panel or board on the floor. It became clear that the battery had stopped after bumping into the edge of this board. Without much thought, he grasped the board and easily lifted it. It was lighter than expected. It appeared to be a thin plywood sheet, and beneath it, he froze in terror with what he saw. There was a hole, approximately 5 meters deep and 3 meters wide, likely the former site of some machinery. The pit had smooth sides devoid of any handholds or footholds, clearly not designed for human access. Falling into that would make self-rescue impossible. Covering this deadly hole were 2 plywood panels. Had these boards been placed there when the mine was abandoned? A recognized the boards. They matched the materials he noticed at the entrance of the building. When he shined his flashlight on the second untouched board, he let out an involuntary gasp of horror. The untouched panel had dust on it similar to the surrounding floor, but the dust seemed unnatural. Its uneven distribution gave the eerie impression that someone had deliberately sprinkled the dust over the panel by hand. Terrified with the realization that someone who had visited had intentionally set a fatal pitfall trap for him, he immediately fled the building, choosing a paved path where traps would be less likely. He quickly returned to his vehicle and left the abandoned mine. After hearing his story, I asked him, "Now why would anybody do something like that?" He replied curtly, "It's just someone's idea of a prank, I guess." Then after a moment, he added, "You know, humans can harbor unimaginable malice towards people, towards someone they can't see, someone out of reach. And that has really stayed with me. Someone set up that trap and walked away with the knowledge that whoever stepped through those boards would have plummeted to a life-threatening injury, if not death. If whoever fell through that hole was alone, and lived. They might have been there calling out for hours, maybe even days for help. Perhaps the person who set the trap might have been nearby, listening. Humans are the worst. It happened last summer when my two friends and I visited an abandoned building deep in the mountains, a place rumored to be haunted. We arrived a little past midnight. It was raining, which made everything feel damp and suffocating. It was very eerie. The abandoned house wasn't especially large or imposing, and at first glance nothing particularly strange happened. Honestly, it felt a bit anticlimactic, given all the creepy rumors we'd heard about the place, which I'll get onto in a moment. But there was one thing that bothered me during our exploration. My friend, who stood immediately to my right, kept chewing gum with a loud, incessant smacking noise. It was incredibly irritating and distracting. It's one of my pet peeves. And on top of that, I noticed his breathing seemed unusually heavy, almost labored. I was thinking, how the hell can you be out of breath from just walking around? After finishing our somewhat disappointing exploration, I turned to my friend as we were preparing to leave. With a half-joking tone, I said, "Hey, your table manners have always been pretty bad, you know. Like earlier when you were smacking your gum and... Man, it was driving me crazy." My friend looked at me, completely bewildered, and said quietly, "Wasn't chewing any gum?" At that very moment, a loud, unsettling, chewing sound echoed from the abandoned building behind us. It was unmistakably the same disgusting rhythmic smacking that I had been hearing. We instantly bolted back to our car, panic surging through us, and we sped away from that place as fast as possible. According to local legend, though no one knows how true it really is, the house had been the scene of a horrific tragedy. It was said that the father had gone mad, murdering his entire family and living with their smoked flesh stored in the house for nearly a year. Reflecting on it now, I can't help but wonder about those awful chewing sounds. Could it have been the ghostly echo of the insane father, eternally reliving his gruesome meals? Or perhaps the restless spirits of his victims, trapped forever, haunting that decaying ruin with their tormented presence? Whatever it was, the thought alone makes my skin crawl, and I never want to find myself near that cursed building again. About 20 years ago, I had a surreal experience that I can't fully explain. I've never had anyone in my life who really understood paranormal stuff, so I'm hoping by writing this down, someone out there might have an idea of what I actually encountered. Back in college, I was drifting through life. No goals, no dreams. I wasn't in any clubs, sports, or academic groups. I just kind of existed. The only thing that I ever really did was go on random drives with two friends, Ken and Satoshi, who were pretty much in the same boat as me. Eventually we got bored of just cruising around, and without anyone really suggesting it directly, we started exploring what we considered abandoned roads. Now, an abandoned road for us was just a road that had kind of fallen out of use, maybe because a new highway replaced it, or it was just sketchy looking. A side road that went nowhere. We weren't trying to go off-roading or anything crazy. We only explored places Ken's Suzuki Jimny could reasonably handle. And strangely, this new hobby actually stuck. Something about the otherworldly feel of forgotten places resonated with us. It gave our boring days a kind of eerie spark. One day Ken said, I found a good one. You want to go check it out? It was just after 2 p.m., and since none of us had any plans, Satoshi and I immediately said, yeah? So we hopped into Ken's Jimny and headed out. The place was about 30 minutes away from campus, nestled off a winding road. From a busy main road, a narrow side path veered off at an angle. As soon as we reached onto it, we noticed weeds pushing up through the asphalt, loose stones and twigs scattered everywhere. It clearly hadn't been used in ages. But about 100 meters in, the path abruptly ended. That's it? Satoshi and I grumbled. Ken just smirked and pointed to the side. Look at that. At first we thought the wall running along the road was just a standard landslide barrier. But partway along, it gave way to a chain link fence, and behind that fence the road continued. I'm pretty sure we can get in. The fence was only held shut by thin wire. Ken came prepared with wire cutters and snipped it like it was nothing. We all climbed back into the Jimny and drove in. Honestly, it didn't really feel like we were doing anything wrong. We figured we'd only be able to go a short distance before fallen trees or debris blocked our way, but to our surprise, the road beyond the fence was in even better condition than the part before it. It was almost too clean. We kept going for 5 minutes along this narrow mountain path, then a brick arch appeared, like an old aqueduct tunnel, only 4 or 5 meters deep. It was wide enough for the Jimny, so we drove straight through it. Once we emerged on the other side, the road started to degrade, stones scattered across the surface, and that's when Satoshi suddenly shouted, "Stop the car, look behind us." We turned to look, and that's when we saw it. A torii gate, just like the ones at shrines, was standing directly over the tunnel's exit, so tight against the arch you wouldn't see it until you were already under it, and the only way to get through the tunnel was to pass under the gate. That gave us all an uneasy feeling. We debated on turning back, but eventually agreed to press on, just a bit further. Hi, Jay here. In my experience, it's a bit of a taboo to walk directly under torii gates. I often see people walk to the left or the right of it while bowing their heads, to offer respect to the spirits that reside beyond the gate. I'm assuming this is the reason for that little debate and unease there. Anyway, back to the story. Another 500 meters down the road, the pavement ended. It transitioned cleanly into a dirt path, marked on both sides by 2 small shrine-like structures. The symmetry was unnatural. It looked less like an old road and more like a deliberately constructed boundary line. Instead of turning back, we felt compelled to continue. The dirt path was still wide and surprisingly clear. No fallen trees, no tire tracks either. Looking back, maybe we should have realized that something was off. The cleanliness, the silence. Then we reached an open area that took our breath away. The narrow forest path suddenly opened into a massive flat plain. There were no houses, no farmland, just empty fields as far as we could see. The sky was perfect, cloudless blue. It was stunning. But where were we? This area wasn't far from where we lived, and yet none of us knew that this place existed. It felt like stepping into a dream. Or somewhere we weren't supposed to be. And then, in the distance, we saw something dark. A building. As we drove closer, it became massive. It looked like a traditional thatched roof house, but huge, like gymnasium level huge. No windows, no outbuildings, just one enormous structure at the end of a road that existed solely to lead to it. We parked and stepped out. The air was clear, birdsong absent. It was silent, peacefully so, but unnaturally still. The temperature was perfect, like early spring. It almost made you want to stay forever. But that house, that ridiculously large, thatched structure, shattered the illusion. It was old, dark, made of wood, but not all falling apart. Was someone maintaining it, living here? I'm gonna check it out, I said. Ken agreed. Satoshi hesitated, then said he'd walk around the outside. The front door was heavy but unlocked. We pushed it open. A musty, almost moldy smell hit us. We called out, "Hello? Anyone in here?" But got no response. Inside was a large wooden floor space with walls, a shelf or two completely empty, and a sliding door on one side. The ceiling stretched high above into the darkness, completely open all the way to the rafters. I'm trying my best not to leave anything out. We decided to open the sliding door. The room behind it was shockingly bright. Dozens of skylights lit up the space. It was huge, but what caught our attention were the 5 enormous pillars. Each one was a tree trunk, easily 3 meters in diameter, reaching up for more than 10 meters. "Do trees this big even exist in Japan?" Ken muttered. In the center pillar, we noticed dozens of talisman-like paper charms nailed to the wood. Not with normal nails, but long, crude iron spikes. The writing looked like kanji, but didn't make sense. Then Ken said, "There's something stuck under them," and we looked closer. They were ears. They really looked to me like human ears, hundreds of them nailed to the pillar, along with the charms. The ones near the bottom had decayed into unrecognizable shapes, but the ones up high, they looked fresh. We screamed. We ran. Out of the room, out of the building. We had to find Satoshi and get out. We ran around the massive building to the back. It took time just to get around it, and Satoshi was there, standing still, staring. We froze. Beyond the house, the flat land stretched on, and lined across the horizon were simple wooden altars, each spaced perfectly apart. On each altar, candles were lit, glowing unnaturally bright. They continued past the visible horizon, an endless flickering of fire. "What the hell is this place? This is so bad, we need to go." Satoshi snapped out of it and walked towards us, pale. Then he said, "Hey, where's the sun gone?" And we looked up and the sky was blue and clear, but no sun. The light was even, with no source. The whole sky glowed with unnatural brightness. "Something's been off since we got here," Satoshi muttered, on the verge of tears. "It's too quiet. There's no birds, no bugs, and the road. There wasn't even a single blade of grass growing anywhere near." We grabbed him and ran to the car. On the way, I glanced back at the entrance of the house, and the front door was closed. I could have sworn we left that open. We didn't talk. We just got in the car, turned around and drove. Ken got us back to the start of the abandoned road, and as we approached the main road, we finally saw it. There was the sun sinking into the west. We were back. None of us ever experienced anything like a curse afterwards, no hauntings, no misfortune, but we all remembered it clearly, every second. A few days later, we passed the road's entrance again. The narrow road we'd driven down. It was now completely sealed off with a massive iron gate. Even if it wasn't, I would never go down that road again. Until around middle school, there was this abandoned house near the apartment complex where I lived. Honestly, calling it abandoned doesn't really do it justice. It was basically just a complete ruin. Stuff was thrown around everywhere inside, the walls were crumbling, and you could clearly see everything from the street. There was this shortcut I took between home and school, and I passed by that creepy old abandoned house almost every day, and it was impossible not to notice it. One evening, around dusk, I was walking home, alone, through that shortcut, when I happened to glance into the house. My heart nearly stopped. There was someone inside. I froze in place, staring at this figure who was kneeling in front of what looked like a small, toy piano. His fingers rested on the keys like he was about to play. But he didn't move at all. He was just totally still, head bowed down so far it looked like his chin was nearly touching his chest. I couldn't see his face, but it was definitely a man wearing something formal, like a suit. Everything about him was so eerie, I just turned and ran straight home. I ended up seeing this weird person 3 times before I graduated. The second time, I was with a friend. Both of us were terrified, too scared to even say anything. We just bolted away from there as fast as we could. But the third time was the creepiest, because this time there was another figure, a woman, maybe in her 20s, with semi-long hair, kneeling just like the guy. She also had her own toy piano, fingers still, head bowed deeply in the exact same creepy pose, right next to the man. After that, I couldn't even look at that house anymore, let alone use that shortcut. My family eventually moved and I never found out who those figures were, if they were real or something supernatural. Honestly, I don't even really want to know. I just hope never to see something like that again. Hi, Jay here. Someone later commented, "Toy piano's tiny, right? It doesn't seem like 2 adults could comfortably fit next to one another with their hands on the keys. Sounds kind of like those creepy stories of thin people, you know, hiding in impossible places, like the girl in the Gap. Maybe they were ghosts or some kind of hallucination. Either way, super creepy." Then the OP clarified, "Yeah, exactly, but actually, each of them had their own toy piano. 1 at first, and then 2 the last time I ever saw them. So I guess the other piano appeared along with the second figure. My friend saw it too, so I don't think I imagined it. I still vividly remember how bizarre their posture was, heads so far forward, their chins practically touching their collarbones. They weren't that thin though, that's one thing I can say for sure. They honestly looked like real people. Thinking about it still gives me the chills. Were they ghosts, stuck in some endless, silent ritual? Or echoes of people who once lived there, trapped in those awful poses? Or was it as simple as a pair of weirdos, humans, posing like that for reasons only known to them? I don't know. And I'm honestly quite glad I moved away. That area was weird. There was a locally famous abandoned building, and though none of us had ever visited it, my friends H and K and I decided to check it out as a test of courage. None of us had ever experienced ghosts or sleep paralysis, yet somehow we were all easily frightened. Without anyone explicitly suggesting it, we all agreed to visit during the day, partially due to the rumors of local delinquents frequenting the area at night. Apparently this place had once been part of a vacation village, but now it was entirely swallowed up by wild vegetation, while the surrounding buildings had long been demolished, leaving behind only empty foundations. This one ruin still stood mysteriously intact. Wondering aloud if there might be some sinister reason it remained untouched, we parked our car and trudged through the thick underbrush for a few hundred meters before the ruin finally came into view. The building was larger and far more decrepit than I had imagined. The windows were all shattered, graffiti-covered walls, and part of the roof had collapsed. If we'd had come at night, I doubt we would have dared entered. Its foreboding appearance alone would have stopped us, but under the bright summer sun, accompanied by the loud sound of reassuring chorus of crickets, it didn't seem particularly scary. At first glance, it was your typical abandoned building. Furniture was scattered and broken, hinting at past grandeur. Likely a beautiful place once upon a time. Figuring we might as well explore, we started upstairs. However, after noticing several holes in the floor, probably caused by previous visitors falling through, we quickly abandoned the upper floor. sorry for being cowards. Carefully testing each step, we explored the first floor instead. Despite the mess, it was clear that whoever owned this place was quite wealthy. Even the decayed sofa and china cabinets looked expensive. Everything was perfectly ordinary until H shouted, suddenly, startling us. Turning around, we saw that he'd stepped through a weak floorboard. Kay and I laughed uncontrollably as H cautiously freed his foot, then curiously peered into the hole he'd created. By now I was hungry and growing tired of the gloomy atmosphere of the abandoned house. "Let's get out of here before someone gets hurt," I said to H, but he didn't move. Instead, he took out a small pen-sized flashlight from his pocket and began shining it into the hole. "What's down there?" Kay asked, peering over. H mumbled distractedly, Now what's that? Is that a room?" "Well, yeah, it's definitely a room." Suddenly, he was silent. "What's wrong? Did you find something?" Kay asked. H didn't respond. He just stood rigidly, staring into the hole. Initially, I thought he was joking, trying to scare us, but when I approached him, I saw how heavily he was sweating. His body trembled uncontrollably, drool dripping from his mouth. I shook him, shouting, "Hey, snap out of it!" But there was no reaction. Suddenly, his trembling worsened, and he made a choking, strangled noise as if an invisible hand gripped his throat. His eyes rolled back, foam bubbling from his mouth. Then, from deep inside the hole, we heard faint whispering. "This is bad. We need to leave now," Kay shouted, grabbing H and slinging him over his shoulder. Both of us pale with terror. We carefully but quickly navigated back through the ruin, feeling like the exit was impossibly far. An overwhelming sense of dread surged from behind. Something unseen was drawing nearer, and I nearly burst into tears from the fear. As we stumbled outside, the previously deafening cicadas fell, eerily silent. We sprinted wildly through the thick brush back to our car, and as we drove down the mountain towards town, H finally regained consciousness, sobbing uncontrollably, repeatedly begging for help and crying, "I'm so cold." We instinctively headed straight into a nearby temple instead of a hospital. It just felt right. The temple priest told us to never speak of what happened there, so I'll leave out the details, but thankfully H recovered fully. Only once, trembling and sobbing, H described what he'd seen. Looking down through the hole, he'd seen a basement strewn with countless tiny animal bones, probably rats. As he swept his flashlight around, something darted through the beam, paralyzing him instantly. Slowly, this thing crept back into the beam of light. Its emaciated body was deathly pale, its gender impossible to determine, hair thin and patchy. It murmured something incomprehensibly as it moved, its movements unnaturally jerky and slow. Finally, it raised its head, revealing a wrinkled face with tightly closed eyes. Those eyes opened slowly, revealing no whites or pupils, only two terrifyingly solid, crimson orbs, like clots of fresh blood. The creature fixed H with an expression of pure hatred, and instantly he felt himself choking, unable to breathe. After that, he remembered nothing. Kay and I never saw it ourselves, but the memory of that whispering voice remains vivid. 4 years have passed since then, and nothing strange has happened to Kay or me. However, H still occasionally visits the temple, haunted by the lingering stare of whatever was living in that basement. Reading through these stories reminded me of something back when I was a kid who played football. I used to stop by this abandoned building on my way home from practice. I always walked home alone because my house was in a completely different direction from everyone else on the team. It was a really rural area, pretty isolated. This abandoned house was split into 2 floors, and according to rumors, 2 people had actually taken their lives upstairs. Nobody seemed to know why exactly, but the place quickly became abandoned after that incident. The first floor was bad enough, totally decrepit and creepy, but the second floor was notorious for giving people an intense, bone-chilling dread. Anyway, one day, I don't know why, but I guess I was feeling brave. I decided to go in and check it out, and the place was filthy, with broken glass everywhere and a bed that looked like it was rotting, with stuffing spilling out all over the place. Despite feeling uneasy, I climbed up to the second floor. I figured I'd come all that way. I guess I could get some bragging rights out of it, right? I regretted it immediately. As soon as I reached the top, a deep icy chill seeped into my bones. Even though sunlight streamed through the broken window panes, what really freaked me out was the floor. It was smeared all over with blood, and strangely enough, it didn't look that old or dried. It seemed kind of fresh, glistening in spots like freshly painted fences, as if someone had spilled it moments ago. I couldn't believe what I was witnessing. Feeling an overwhelming urge to get out of there, I turned to hurry downstairs, but then I heard a heavy, frantic thumping and rattling. A sound coming from a room deeper inside the second floor. Instinctively I froze and I glanced towards the sound. And in the fractured sunlight, spilling through the broken windows, a figure approached. It was a homeless man. Towering, impossibly tall, close to 2 meters, 6'5" at least, with wild, matted hair covering his face. His entire body was rigid, sinewy, and covered from head to toe in blood. In his right hand he held a large, gleaming knife, its blade smeared. Everything about him looked unnatural, monstrous even, like something straight out of a nightmare. Imagine the killer from the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and you'll have a good idea of what he looked like. Truly terrifying. My heart nearly stopped and adrenaline surged through me as I dashed downstairs and sprinted outside, missing most of the stairs on the way down. I grabbed my bike and pedaled furiously away, glancing back one last time when I felt I was safely at a good distance away. Seeing nobody, I breathed a shaky sigh of relief. It was way too close, I thought. But as I turned forward again, my eyes involuntarily flicked back up to the second floor window. Standing there, framed against the pale daylight, was the homeless man. Knife still firmly gripped in his hand, and he stared directly at me, his figure looming silently, watching as I sped away. Even now I wonder what exactly happened in that building, whose blood had been spilled across the floor, and what that man had been doing inside, who or what had been his victim. The possibilities make my blood run cold. Scared of being ridiculed, I kept this to myself. I didn't think anyone would believe me. I'm sure I would have been accused of seeing things or making things up. I never went anywhere near that place again. In the mountains of Niihama City, Ehime Prefecture, the ruins of the old Besshi Coal Mine still remain, a historic site that shut down in 1973. Among the many remnants, the Tonaru area is especially famous. Perched in the mountains and overgrown with time, It's even been nicknamed the Machu Picchu of the East. This is a story about the terrifying experience I had at Besshi Mine, specifically in the Tornado area. That day, I was on a casual drive with 3 of my high school friends. We weren't really headed anywhere in particular, just stopping by random places for fun. At some point, one of them looked up something on their phone and found out the Besshi copper mine was nearby. And since it was known as a stunning industrial ruin, we decided to check it out. We didn't have any better plans. The road up to the Tornado site was a narrow mountain path, just wide enough for a single car to pass through. If another car came from the opposite direction, we'd have to pull over at one of the passing points, making it a little nervy and a little exciting. About 5 kilometers into the drive, we saw some old wooden buildings that looked like part of a small village, and just beyond them was a parking lot. It was already past 5 p.m. There were only a few cars left, so we parked and got out. The sun was setting, casting golden light across the mountain ridges and offering an incredible view of the Seto Inland Islands. There was a stairway made of the remnants of an incline rail system over about 200 steps that led us down to the brick ruins of the mine. The structures, half reclaimed by nature, were so hauntingly beautiful we all stopped just to take it in. While we were busy taking pictures, the sun slipped beneath the horizon and it started to get dark. "Time to head back," someone said. We returned to the parking lot, and by then our car was the only one left. As we walked towards it, my friend Akito suddenly stopped. "What's wrong?" I asked. "No, it's nothing," he said, eyes averted. He just kept walking. We all got in the car. Masahiro, who was driving, turned the key, but nothing happened. The engine wouldn't start. He tried several more times, but still nothing. I took a turn just to make sure, but the car was completely dead. I figured it was just some mechanical failure, but when I reached for my phone to look up what to do, I realized no signal. Of course, we were deep in the mountains. There we were, stranded by the ruins of the old coal mine as the night sky grew darker. We started talking about what we could do. Someone suggested hiking down the mountain to find help, but none of us really wanted to trek through a pitch-black mountain path with no flashlights. Who knows how long it would take us to get down there? Since none of us had anything important the next day, we decided to wait it out in the car until morning. Then Akito muttered something under his breath. "We sure the cars broke down?" "What do you mean?" my other friend, Yuji, asked from the passenger seat. "Well, I didn't say anything earlier, but before we got in the car, I thought I saw someone. Maybe a man already sitting inside." There was a long, uncomfortable silence. "You're kidding, right?" Masahiro laughed nervously. "Well, I hope so," Akito replied. "Why would you say that now?" Yuji snapped, his irritation thinly veiled. Outside the car, the single streetlight in the parking lot cast long shadows into the forest, and the darkness around us felt suffocating. "Can we put some music on or something?" I suggested. I just wanted to break up the tension. We played some Western music and spoke for a while, trying our best to pretend that things were normal. But it was only just past 9 p.m, and time seemed to be dragging on painfully slow. "I have to use the bathroom," Yuji said quietly. There was a restroom about 50 meters away, out of sight behind a concrete barrier. "Anyone want to come with me?" he asked awkwardly. Not wanting to leave him alone, I volunteered. There was still some nervousness amongst us, and it was obvious. Outside, the air was chilly. Crickets chirped faintly. As we walked, Yuji asked, "Do you think this is some kind of ghost thing?" "Well, I don't know," I said. But I don't think Akito was lying. He's not the type. Something feels kind of off. Yeah, I really wish we hadn't come here. Don't worry, it'll be okay. Things will feel normal again once the sun comes up, I said. The bathroom was dim, partially blocked from the lot by that wall, and eerie in its own right. While we took care of business, we kept talking to distract ourselves. As we walked back, Yuji suddenly froze. The hell is that? His whole body was shaking. I looked in the direction he was pointing, and there were 4 figures inside our car, and we had only left Akito and Masahiro behind. Yuji screamed and bolted towards the parking lot exit. I stood there frozen, unsure whether to chase after him or check the car. In the end, I ran back to the car, and as soon as I opened the door, Akito and Masahiro turned towards me, startled, and the extra figures we saw from outside were gone. I explained what I saw, and Akito and Masahiro immediately jumped out of the car. We had to find Yuji. We ran after him, calling his name. The road from the lot led uphill, and at the top were more shadowy wooden buildings. We shouted his name again and again, but only the sound of the wind in the trees answered us. Had he gone down the mountain alone? Panic started to creep in, and then I noticed we were down to 2 people. "Where's Akito?" I asked. Masahiro just shook his head. It felt like something, whatever was out there, was trying to split us up. The wind picked up. It was sharp and biting. Masahiro and I sprinted back to the car, but when I reached it and looked back, Masahiro was gone too. Confused and terrified, I screamed his name, but no one answered. 3 of my friends gone, one by one. I threw myself into the driver's seat and I locked the doors. I tried starting the car again, but nothing. Bang, bang, I felt the sudden thuds against the driver's side door that made me jump. I looked out the window, but there was no one there. Thud, thud, open up. A muffled voice came through the door. It almost sounded like Akito, or maybe Masahiro, or Yuji. Thud, thud, please open up. Why wouldn't they show their face to me? Why not knock the window where I could see them? My gut screamed at me not to open the door. But what if it was really one of them, injured or crawling? Thud, 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 open up. I didn't know what to do. I wanted to block my ears, to run, but in the end I couldn't abandon my friends. So I opened the door a crack and peeked outside. There was no one out there, so I slammed the door shut again, pounding. Cold sweat was pouring down my face at this point. Please, just let this be a nightmare, I was pleading with myself as I closed my eyes. But I didn't wake up. When I opened my eyes again, I froze because I saw dozens of figures surrounding the car, staring straight at me. I screamed and screamed, and then I felt something grab my shoulder. From the passenger seat and the back seat, shadowy figures emerged, featureless black shapes with bulging round eyes. And when I came to, it was morning. I was sitting in the back seat. Akito, Masahiro, and Yuji were all there too, in the same places they'd been when we first arrived. One by one we woke up. Each of us had experienced a similar nightmare, it seemed. When Masahiro turned the key, the car started instantly, as if nothing had ever been wrong. We left Besshi Coal Mine as fast as we could. Even now, we don't know what happened. Maybe it was a shared hallucination. It's not impossible, I guess, or maybe it was something more. But one thing we all agree on is that place has something really dark attached to it. Back when I was in elementary school, there was this staircase we all called the Big Staircase in the woods on the way home, to and from our school. It was exactly as simple as it sounds. At the very top of the stairs, we could see a small hut, almost hidden. by dense foliage and tangled vines. It looked as if it was teetering right at the edge of a cliff. One day, 4 of my friends and I decided we'd go check it out. Taking a roundabout path, we realized that the hut was right beside a graveyard, surrounded by thick, overgrown trees. All the windows were shattered, and all the walls were smeared with dark stains. Still, with my friends around, I wasn't particularly scared. We got closer and peered inside. It was clearly abandoned. Cracks ran across the walls, and clothes and furniture were scattered chaotically around the room. But in the very center stood an old organ, exactly like the ones you'd see in an old school classroom. It looked like it was in pretty good condition amidst all the filth. Oddly, cotton fluff was scattered around it, equally untouched and clean compared to everything else. We laughed nervously, joking about how creepy it all was, when suddenly we heard a faint tapping sound coming from the right side of the room we'd been looking into. The door to that room had fallen off its hinges, but apparently there was another room further inside. One of my friends called out jokingly, "Who's there?" Though, thinking back, that was probably not the greatest idea. There was no reply, just silence, except for the slow, steady tapping, like footsteps getting closer and closer. It felt as if whoever, or whatever was making that sound, was about to appear right before us, just as the footsteps seemed unbearably close. For some reason, we all screamed at once and ran away as fast as we could. We finally slowed down, feeling relieved, when we spotted a local farmer nearby. But just then, from the hut behind us, a long, eerie note rang out from the organ, a deep, resonating "dung." Turning back, we could see clearly the organ lid was firmly closed. That was our cue to exit, and fast. Later, when I asked my parents about it, they told me that there had been an arson incident at that hut. They never confirmed whether anyone died or not. Thinking about it now, maybe it was just some shady person or a delinquent hiding in there, messing with us. But the way it quietly approached us without a word, that weird tapping sound, that still sent chills to my bones.